Okay.
Okay.
All right, someone said that they could not see the screen. Can you see the screen now if it's smaller?
Yeah, I can see it fine.
Okay, all right.
And I have a question.
Yes,
Will we be notified of the board meetings when they're scheduled?
I don't know if I don't see any reason we couldn't do that. You mean the regular board meetings?
Yeah, the regular board meetings and the board meetings scheduled to discuss the new covenant. I mean, I would like to be able to attend.
Well, that's part of this discussion.
Yeah, I understand, but going forward, I'd like to follow this through.
Yes, absolutely. I think the decision was that we were going to bring it up to the residents today. We were going to record it, then post it on post the recording on Facebook. And we are still collecting as of now. We have 42 people who have responded to the survey. We are still collecting survey responses. We felt like some might want to hold until after this meeting. And then the survey will close on August 5th. Once August 5th happens, we will download all of those survey responses and go over them. And then again, we will then discuss our next steps, and we might have another Zoom call so we can openly discuss those results, what the percentages were for each question, and maybe some of the issues that some folks may have with each question. I don't know. I mean, I think we could redact names from those survey questions, but let's just go ahead and, once we get the results, let's talk to the board's going to discuss how we're going to handle it. But we certainly do not mind. I don't think we will mind sharing those survey responses if we redact the names, because I understand that some people may just want to answer those survey questions honestly, but they may not want to broadcast it to the whole neighborhood. So that is our timeline. That is what we're planning to do. Jeff?
Yeah, I think that's,
Robin?
and I think it's a great idea to maybe have another, once we've had the survey closed and we've had a chance to look through the results and maybe summarize them ourselves a bit, have another meeting, I think would be a great idea to go through those and talk about next steps from that point as well.
So I would like a little more context. Simi, your statement a couple minutes ago was you think the covenants that were originally existed have expired?
The
That is
1982
correct.
covenants have, yes.
Okay. Are any of those covenants reflected in this survey?
I don't think so.
No, and they're probably more general than this, more about use of property, those kinds of things. That's kind of what those were mostly focused on. They weren't as specific as these covenants.
So that's kind of why I'm trying to understand context. Is this a survey or is this a vote?
No, this is a survey only.
That's a survey.
So, and this survey only addresses new topics that were not already in the covenants. Once we come up with, I would assume, some of the newer covenant language, we will draft or have a lawyer draft up the covenants. And again, that will go out to the homeowners. Nothing will be filed. Nothing will be drafted final until we get the final say from our homeowners. That is correct, Jeff?
Yeah, until if we get the 2/3 or more vote for a provision, then it would be added. If not, then we would not.
And neighbors, just to add along with this, Heritage Property Management has been with us for the last 3 years, and they have been telling us for the last 3 years, what is left of your covenants is not really up to date in the 21st century. And they've been asking us to look at it. We had to wait until we had enough board members to even start this process. So I'll be perfectly honest, if anybody would like to assist, we've got about 8 or 9 people that are volunteering double duty on many jobs. This is a whole nother ballgame. So if there are some folks that would like to volunteer for that exclusive committee, we definitely would welcome that, because this is a process that's going to take some time. First one is survey. What's the feedback? The second one is, do we think we have the ability to move forward? If we have a lot of pushback, I'll be honest with you, none of us want to waste any time moving forward. We only want to move forward with the things that our homeowners are interested in. I do not want to knock doors to try to get people to give a consent if they don't want to do it. So what we're looking for is what the neighborhood's thought. What is the consensus? What do you want to do? We do not address Airbnb. Is that an issue for you? If it's not, okay. We don't address parking. We tell people to reach out to Roswell about parking on the street. There's just things that are, as Jeff Olmsted says, our covenants don't have a lot of legs. You know, all homes were not part of the HOA. We have about 26 homes that still are not. But as new homeowners are moving in, they are opting to come into our HOA. They're opting to pay in, and once they join, they're in for the rest of that home. That home is always in the HOA. They don't have an option to leave. So we just want to be mindful of the suggestions made by Heritage. We pay them money to give us the best suggestions, and they're saying that your covenants really need to be updated. But we need the support of the neighborhood on what that's going to look like. We may have some ideas, but it definitely is not our decision. Those of us that are volunteering, it's the neighborhood decision.
Right, right. I mean,
Who
we
do
had.
contact if we wish to volunteer?
Sorry.
The board email. Let me actually, if you go to your chat, let's see. I don't have the email there. I'm going to put our email in the chat. So let me just ask you, are you getting our newsletter? Are you on Facebook, and are you receiving any emails from us at all? Because that's one thing. I want to make sure that everyone's getting notification from us so that you do know who to contact.
You see them on Facebook?
Yeah.
For them? Okay. Yeah, we're getting them.
Okay.
Yeah.
We also have the Woodfield website, which gives you just a click and a link away. You can actually contact the board, all of us, or individual volunteers for each committee. And then the Heritage website is just a little bit separate. That's where your dues, if you have any requests, there's a couple other pieces to that.
Right.
Yeah, we'd welcome
Okay.
that, John. If you wanted to help, that would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go ahead and put, Jeff, can I go ahead and put your email in the chat so that John could reach out to you if you'd like?
Yeah, sure.
Great. I'll do that right now, guys. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So the first question we had to do with non-owner occupied leasing, and this was really designed to make sure that to see what is the feeling about a non-owner occupied home being able to have very short-term leasing, like a vacation home type of a thing, where you're just doing a week here or 2 weeks there, that kind of thing, and there's no long-term lease there. And that was the intent of this, was to ask that question, if there should be a covenant that would restrict that if you're a non-owner occupied home. And we had, as I remember, at least the last time I looked, when there were 22 responses, and I didn't look at the one with 42, but it seemed to be almost overwhelming that people were for this kind of a covenant to as far as non-owner occupied. Someone had a question about it, what it meant, but it's really basically to address that situation where someone has just bought a home and they don't want to lease it out. They just want to do short-term leases that we would not, that would be against our covenants. Now,
Can I make it? Oh, I'm
Sure.
sorry.
Please.
I was gonna make a comment. So guys, I'm new to the neighborhood, and I lived in another neighborhood where I actually did Airbnb out my house during COVID because the Army had me in another state. It was against the covenants, but it was almost like a financial hardship. And it was like a minimum of like a month long that I let somebody stay. I wouldn't let them stay shorter than that, because unfortunately the stereotype is true. You get owners or tenants, if you will, that just don't care. So one of my responses, and quite transparent about it, was, yeah, that kind of a covenant makes sense because I had some bad experiences as a host that embarrassed me as an owner in my neighborhood. So I get both sides of that coin, but as somebody who hosted and who might even consider that again once upon a time, but not in this house because Jessica will kill me. I recommended a 3-month lease because we also have a lot of corporations in the area, and we do have folks that are in transition from homes to assisted living or even divorces. So a minimum of a 3-month lease was kind of my recommendation because that kind of walks the line between people that are looking for a home and need a temporary place to stay, and it avoids the really hard, embarrassing moments when police show up at your house because somebody decided to act like a fool because they have 5 stars on Airbnb. So that was just my comment because I've been on both sides of that. Thank you for listening.
Well, thank you for your comment. And we understand that there'd be times when, and maybe someone wasn't intending to be a non-occupying owner, but circumstances have changed, and maybe they're like maybe you're in the military and you're called off and you can't be there, but you can't, it'd be hardship to not do something with it. So how to word that in the because eventually this will be a vote. These will be voted on by the community. So this is more of a survey here, but we will need to be more specific in the voting so that we don't have any ambiguity as to what we're talking about here. So like a 3-month minimum or 6-month minimum, those are things that we could put in possibly into the question vote. So I 3 or 6 months, and someone said a year is be the minimum. So there's a range of what folks have thought. So, and I don't know that the board we've not talked about that as specifically as a number that we've come to on that, but the idea of putting some limitations clearly seems that the community would like that. So, but maybe we can make a note on this one to include a range of times so that we can get the sense of the community as to when we vote on this, which one.
You
Which
also
one
had
would
a comment about a charge, like an upcharge for somebody who's going to do that. And honestly, anybody who's going to do this for financial gain or for financial duty, a charge that you give them, they can pass off to a person who stays in the home. So that charge isn't necessarily prohibitive, but it does raise the bar on the quality of person that may be staying there. So I'm also for that. Again, remember, I used to host, so I don't like people trying to tell me what to do, but an intelligent host, a quality host, which I was trying to get to before COVID, you have to really think about, okay, if these charges are scaring off people, are these the people I want staying in my home? And if you're an investment home person, maybe not. But if you're a long-term quality, neighborhood person, then those charges that you charge them, they can be passed off to the person who stays there. So I think that's also a good way to prevent problems. But again, that's just my 2 cents. That's what I wrote in my write-up as well.
Yeah, I think that's a later question in this.
Yeah.
The fee for, and I think that was more directed toward more long-term leasing for for that rather than the short term. Yeah, so that would be that. I mean, that's certainly something we could consider as well. But that's that when we get to that one, people will know a little bit more what you're talking about, or probably have already seen that question. The next question related. Any other comments about A? Anyone else have any thoughts? Anything you want to share? Okay, let's move on to the next one for owner-occupied leasing. Now this is where we get into the Airbnb type of thing, where someone is living there, but maybe they go on vacation or they're away to another place that they go, and while they're gone, they'd like to be able to, to lease out their home for a couple of weeks or something like that. Or Super Bowl comes to town and they want to. I know people have did that where they'll do that, lease out their home for that period of time. And again, getting a feel for the community as to what restrictions there should be on this. Or should there be a total number of days that you're allowed to do that, or not at all allowed to do that? That's what the sense of this question.
Is there a difference between renting out the whole house versus like a room in the house?
In what sense, sir?
I
As
mean,
a
in
host,
both
I
of these, I don't know if these are talking about renting out the whole house.
So
Mostly-
there's different markets for that. So yeah, I rented out my basement, but I secured the room away from the rest of my house for my children's safety. And
Right.
yeah, there are people that do that. It's not something I desire to do, but after a tough divorce, it was what allowed me to pay my mortgage. But then there are people who rent the whole house, whether it's the whole year long as a vacation rental. So I had to do a little bit of everything. And there's pluses and minuses, but to the neighborhood sense, somebody who rents out part of their house while they're living there, even if you have a 3-month limit, you'll get a higher quality of person. And I say higher quality of person to be quite honest, you'll get somebody who's more stable.
Yeah, we hadn't really been that granular on this, whether it was part of a house or when I was doing this, we were thinking more in terms of leasing the entire home, but certainly leasing a part of the home would kind of fall under this as well. Similarly, so maybe the same limitations would apply for the term of that lease.
If I can add one last thing, and then I'm gonna shut up for a little bit, is that if you have an owner who takes the smallest room in the house and they rent out 3 additional bedrooms to 3 additional people and or a couple, you have pretty much, created a unique situation. So if you allow one but not the other, you got to be very specific. If you don't allow one but you don't allow the other, either way, I think, and this is what other states and other counties and other cities and specific Facebook groups have learned, is that a time limitation, regardless of the format, seems to separate church from state in a metaphorical rental environment.
No, I understand that. So I think that the time limit would certainly seem to make sense for any type of leasing for a non-owner occupied. Now for owner occupied, we're getting into a mixed bag here when you're talking about owner occupied leasing, because now I was thinking again of the entire house. You're talking about there could be owner occupied leasing where part of the house is being leased for 4 years or something. That may fall more into A than it does B. I don't know how everyone else feels, but that's kind of a more specific case of this. This was intended as, we were thinking of these more in terms of the entire home. Debbie, I think you have that. I don't know if you have that same view, but that's kind of how I was thinking about it.
I do. In fact, I just unmuted. I wasn't going to chime in, but I think the major goal in revising these covenants is to make sure that everyone's property value and the aesthetics and the condition of our homes and subdivision are held up. And I don't think that renting out a room changes that necessarily, because the owners are still present and the owners are still taking care of their homes and the yards and are still responsible for that. So I'm not even sure that's something that necessarily affects any other homeowner other than maybe additional vehicles and parking on the street, which has been a concern for some. But other than that, I think our biggest concern is when the homeowner is not present, the home and the yard and the subdivision as a whole isn't taken care of as well as it is when the homeowner is present. So I think those are 2 separate issues.
Yeah, and it might be simpler to limit this to, and maybe even be more specific. This is limited to the restrictions for non-owner occupied. That's pretty clear, but for the owner occupied, this is a leasing like the Airbnb type of a thing, where it's really addressing that more than it is a lease that you might have, because you're going to be there that whole time while someone is there. So I don't know. That's what the intent of this was. So as we see the survey results, we might, when we come back with the actual questions for the provisions, some of that might be a bit iterative as well, I would imagine. We might end up changing some of them as we go through. Again, as Robin said, it's the intent of this is to get the sense of the community and to make sure that we're in line. We're not trying as a board to assert any preconceived ideas we have about these. We're neighbors as well, and we just want the best for our neighborhood. And so, but we're not going to try to fight too much for things that might be, not desired in the community. But I think maybe being more simplified with it might be, and more specific to this might be easier for this one. As Debbie said, I think that's a good point, Debbie. If owners are there, a lot of those concerns go away for rentals. Leading to the next question, which is related very much to the total number of long-term renters allowed at Woodfield at one time. This would be, again, it goes to, communities where there are significant percentage of homes that are renters tend to not be kept as well and start to deteriorate in communities themselves in the subdivisions. And that was the intent of this as well, to see if is there some kind of limitation we want to put into our covenants related to the number of renters we would want to have in our neighborhood.
So this limits the number of houses that are rented.
This would limit the number of houses. So if a house, and obviously there's a current situation that we're frankly not really aware of yet, because it's not something it's easy to track right now to know how many houses are rented. There are some that you kind of know are, because you can see the for rent signs, and then you see that they go away and you realize, so there's someone who's rented that home. But if there's a certain grandfathering, we understand now, if we have a percentage and then we find out what that is, we might be over that percentage already. I don't have any way of knowing that. But the idea would be to work that number down so that to a percentage that would be at least viewed as more sustainable by our community. And maybe by the end of a lease period would drop that house from being able to be rented, or the sale of a home. Those are a couple of options for ending those existing rentals. So, any questions or comments about that? There were several comments I know that we saw, but anybody want to speak about that? Okay. And again, this kind of leads, what I said before leads into this. This is the grandfathering for leases. If that, we would need to include a provision that would recognize the current situation and not immediately require people to stop leases, because frankly they couldn't really, because if those are contractual. So almost if we're going to put a restriction, I think it's going to be hard to get around understanding that there might be some grandfathering that has to happen depending on what we find. The other part of this is obviously there will have to be some kind of knowledge gathering, maybe by Heritage, of how many units are owner occupied and how many are not. Of those in our neighborhood that are part of the HOA.
And Jeff, if I may, part of our access card redistribution was to really identify emails, phone numbers for homeowners and get a little bit of identify who was renting, leasing. When we look in our Heritage portal, the board has access to see HOA homeowners and dues. We can tell by some of the names because they're management companies. Other names we would have no idea whatsoever. So this will always be a work in progress. It's not a, we'll do the survey, set this up, put this in motion, it's gonna work. It's
Mhm.
gonna take some extra moving parts, and it probably might need, as I said, an extra committee for it as well. It's not a simple solution. It's many steps to get where we would like to be.
Yeah, it's not a simple matter, but the effort, I think, is a good one if we want to do this and limit the number of rentals. I think that's something that could be positive for the community to make sure that we don't have too many rentals and then it's a tipping point. I think a bit it can be for community. Next question. Talking about hardship cases, whether we should include some provision for that, because someone may need to rent their home for some financial hardships, and we just heard a story about that. Someone who had to do that in the previous residence they had. So whether that was the intent here was to see if that kind of provision would be needed, because we would need to have that in place in order to actually be able to do that as a board. Otherwise, we don't want that to be arbitrary. We want that to be very clear what's the board responsibilities are and what leeway they may have in this. So, and there were some comments about this that I saw that were some positive, some not so positive about granting those kind of exceptions, and how you might determine what those are, what is a hardship and what is not. Anyone want to share their thoughts?
Well, Jeff, I'm on the board, not one of the homeowners that are present, but I can share that I have experienced both sides of the issue. So my husband was transferred to work in El Paso, Texas. We didn't want to sell our home. We were only supposed to be gone for 18 months. We were gone for 3 years. And we rented out the house, and the house and yard was destroyed by the time we got back. It was something we needed to do to be able to keep our home, but the damage was not only sizable, but I felt terrible for the neighbors who had to endure the damage and the yard going to pot when we were not here to see it. So there are two sides to the coin, and I don't really know what the answer is. I think in our questionnaire, we mentioned having an approved management company, which I think makes a difference. So if someone's in a hardship position or has to rent their home, at the very least, we have some type of control in place where someone is watching out for the neighbors and the condition of that home to make sure that it doesn't fall into disrepair and inconvenience the surrounding neighbors.
Yeah, and that could even be triggered by maybe a lack of care of the home or something. It's like, I'm not sure that we can. I'm not sure that we can force someone to hire a management company to manage their home, because many people do that on their own and do it and do it well, and some don't do it well. If they're not in town, especially, that's very difficult to do.
And maybe it needs to be part of their lease. And maybe the tenant needs to pay that part. I don't know. I don't know if that's a possibility.
Yeah, and I think it certainly would be on the homeowner to be liable for that, either for damages or whatever costs that maybe are incurred. I don't know. There could be ways of handling that contractually where we can do that, but from the beginning, though, if someone is trying to lease their home, it might be difficult to force them to use a management company.
I
don't know
just
that
don't
HOA
know how to protect the neighborhood and the surrounding
Right.
neighbors from the damage that is incurred when you have a renter that isn't as concerned about the property as the homeowner is.
Yeah, and maybe that's something that the board can force the homeowner to do after it's clear that the property is not being maintained. At that point, they can be forced to hire a management company or whatever other
Well, we had
issues we can do.
we had an instance as well where we had someone rent their home and there were two families in there and that did not respect privacy or kids throwing rocks at cars and just unruly. There was nothing to do other than me make a phone call and fuss at the person who actually rented it, their home out, because it affected everyone. So, I certainly respect that you own your home and we hope that people would seek out folks that would be responsible and courteous to the other homeowners on either side. But there are some times that the homeowner is not in state and they're renting to people who they can't oversee that property. So I think as a board, we should have some kind of say or enforceable fines, penalties, or otherwise to inform the neighbor and say, this has to stop. So, I mean, I love the healthy discussion. My mind is not made up either way. I am going to go with the majority and what is best for the community. But I'm glad we're having this conversation. So just wanted to add that.
I actually wish as a homeowner that somebody had contacted me within that time and let me know what was happening so that I could make the necessary changes or get the tenant out or make sure that they maintained the property, but I didn't even know.
Right. Well, and another thing from a HOA standpoint, if they're not respecting the property itself, who's to say they're going to respect our rules when they come to our pool and
That's right.
or our clubhouse? Do they
Right.
know the rules? Do they care about the rules? And if they slip and fall and they sue, we are liable. So we really have to look at the risk assessment as well and the liability assessment. From that standpoint too. Do we get folks who are going to rent out their home and those renters are going to enjoy our amenities? Do we have them sign a hold harmless or some kind of a waiver? People who don't live in our neighborhood don't care about suing the HOA, but people who are living in our neighborhood are less likely to sue their neighbors, I would think, but I'm not sure. So, Jeff, do you want to go to the next slide?
We do have a question from Richard. He doesn't have a microphone.
Okay. Can you read the question? Because I'm afraid that if I open up my chat, I don't know if you all can see.
Exactly. He said, for renters, how would the board decide who can and cannot rent, and how would you enforce it? Also, if a homeowner doesn't follow these new rules, if they pass, what are the ramifications? That's a really great question. Remember, we do have 20-ish some homes that are not part of the HOA. So this would not be enforceable for them at all. So Jeff, what are your thoughts, Jeff Anderson?
Okay, sorry, I lost my connection for a bit there.
Jeff Anderson, we had a question from Richard. For renters, how would the board decide who can and cannot rent, and how would you enforce it? Also, if a homeowner doesn't follow these new rules, if they were to pass, what are the ramifications? And I was just reminding.
You're on mute, Robin.
You're on mute, Jackson.
I put myself on mute as soon as I got done. I just was saying that we have or so homes that are not part of the HOA, that this would not apply to them at all. And it is hard to remind folks of that we have those homes. So what are your thoughts about that, Jeff? How would we enforce it if this were to be passed, and what are the ramifications?
Well, like any of the other covenants, that there may be some violations, I guess. I mean, it's similar. How do you enforce any of them, I suppose? As far as the rental goes, I guess we would include something with, I don't know, damages is the only I can think of as a lawyer that I would include in there. I would want to talk with our outside real estate attorney as well about that to see what others have done in that situation, where homes are renting even though they're not supposed to be, or and how we would go about legally going about understanding who's renting, who's owner occupying, and then how to control that. But I don't know the answer to that, Robin. Really, that's a good question. That's part of something we'll have to work through.
Yeah, I think the first step is making sure that that is what the majority of the homeowners would like to see happen. And then we need to find out how to make it work.
Yeah, I think that's right. And because it's clearly there are, I've talked some of these through with our attorney already. These are clearly covenants that are included in other HOAs. So we're not treading new ground here at all. But, you'll have some ideas, I think, on how best to maybe police that and understand how to make that effective. But I don't know the answer to that. But I think it's similar to other things. If someone's not keeping up their lawn, their, any of those other provisions that someone might violate, it's a similar issue. How do you first talk to them, but then what does the board do? Certainly there are liens that you can put on properties, I suppose. But Robin you may know more about that as well in your real estate activities, how that happens with HOAs.
Really honest with you. It's kind of along the lines with, the homeowners that are late on their dues. We could send letters, we could add additional fines, but at the end of the day, when you sell your home, we're collecting. It could be a process. So we'd hope to have the neighborhood on board with whatever decisions that we make. We know there'll be a one or two off, but your board definitely isn't going to be policing. We will let the Heritage know if we see something that, and we may even ask, is this home part of the rental? But it's not the job of the volunteers to door knock or to check to see if there's a renter in there. Remember, at the end of the day, we still live here. We want to be good to our neighbors and want to have a peaceful neighborhood. But we still want to be mindful of, I think a lot of you have made great points. Chris, you've done this many times before, you said in a previous home, and you're raising the bar a little bit about the quality of renters or Airbnb. How do we do that? I think you would be a great candidate to even join, although you're doing our social event. You'd be a great candidate to help join on further discussions on this, because it seems like we need additional discussions.
Yeah, and Robin, your comment about the, if there were violations of a provision like this for leasing, the fines are a way, and those, even if they're not collected at the sale of the home, they would be collected. So the same as dues are. So that would be one way of putting some kind of a burden on the homeowner that chooses to not abide by the covenants as passed. So moving on to the next one with the charge for the leasing fee. This was what was brought up earlier. Many people were not in favor of this, but we'll see how the whole survey goes. Many were in favor, so it's kind of a mixed bag. But I can see, as was stated earlier, some benefits to a leasing fee. Certainly for the HOA, for the community, having the costs and things to required in order for these things, like access cards and things like that. We're not talking about an exorbitant fee here, but something that would help to offset some of those costs, and also just as another fee that is, is this a serious renter or not? Because this wouldn't be a large fee, I don't think. I don't think we were thinking about a large one, Debbie, when we put this together. It was more nominal, I think. We don't have a number here, but that would be certainly, that would be part of the provision as it would be voted on, would be a number. The next question related to requiring a management company from a list of acceptable companies to manage the property during the lease term. Again, I'd be interesting to see what everyone thinks of this, but again, I think this one could be hard one to legally bind people to. I may be wrong about that, but I could certainly for existing rentals that may not be as possible. But there is some real reason to do this as well in order to make sure that properties are actually taken care of. And management companies tend to do that better, so.
Well, a lot of times they're local. So if you're out of state, you don't have the ability to check on your own property and you don't know what's happening. Now, the problem is there are a lot of management companies that don't do a very good job either. So it's one of the reasons why one of the questions was whether or not there should be an appointed management company. Maybe the homeowners are given an option of 3 different, pre-qualified management companies that we know are good and do the job that needs to be done to make sure that the homeowners are made aware of the condition of their property and their tenants, and therefore the rest of the homeowners and neighborhood benefit from that. Because not all management companies are good either. And I experienced that as well.
Yeah, and we can, once we see the results of this, it would be interesting. The board will have some more discussion about this as well.
Yeah.
Thanks, Debbie. Moving on to the next question, including a provision that new homeowners would pay an initiation or transfer fee at closing, in addition to the prorated annual dues. We don't currently charge such a fee. I think you had mentioned, Robin, that most HOAs have an initiation or transfer fee for their.
Most HOAs do, and let's be really honest. There's a transfer fee, and then there's an HOA letter that the seller pays. Seller pays the HOA closing fee letter, which is literally a push of the button. But HOAs do have at their discretion to charge a certain dollar amount for that goes back into the budget. And then as well, on the buyer side, a transfer fee. Yes, a lot do. But, again, really want to have this open up to the residents of what they believe would be best. But it is definitely something that we see across the board when we're asking for closing documents or when we're doing community association disclosures. There are initiation and transfer fees.
Robin, what is the among the HOAs that do charge that? What is the typical fee? How much are we talking here?
Some of them it depends on the neighborhood. Some of them it's $200. Some of them it's ridiculous. It's over $1,000. It's the price point of the home. So it's really up to your HOA and your neighborhood to determine what that fee is. At the end of the day, any fees that are collected, remember, roll all the way right back into your HOA budget.
Right. Thank you.
And if I can interject, I think one of the advantages of doing that is that we try our best to keep everyone's homeowners association dues as low as possible. So all of us on the board are volunteers. We all work pretty hard to try to keep things running at no cost to the homeowners, but it's very difficult to make improvements and to keep up the monthly budget and still keep the dues down. So I think that the initiation fee for new people coming in help to boost that account to cover costs that are inevitable for the subdivision.
And just to piggyback on that, right now, we do need a new pool cover. Heritage has just let us know that they are increasing our dues. Every time we reach out to our attorney, we have X amount of complimentary calls to him. But for this is going to cost a little bit of money. And we're finding out all of our vendors across the board have increased their rate. That's one of the reasons we increased our HOA dues as well. But at the end of the day, we don't want to run out of money to be able to maintain your common area, your pool, your tennis courts, the clubhouse. So again, that's why a lot of HOAs do have that cost added. But that's really going to be up to us as a neighborhood. What does that cost look like if you decide that you want to have it?
Yeah, exactly. So the next item, the Architectural Review Committee, the sense of the residents on this, whether we would want to do that to review changes, visible changes or modifications to properties from the street that would be include like structures, tree removal, paint colors, and things like that. In asking this, we realize that this is an established neighborhood with a lot of diversity in look, and as houses have changed their colors and things over time, there's a lot of variation in our neighborhood. Again, the intent of this is to put some teeth to our covenants that would allow us to keep things from being put in that would really harm the value of the neighboring properties or the subdivision as a whole. And that's kind of what the intent of this provision, because we understand that if we had a color palette, you had to have your house color, painted one of these colors. Most of the homes wouldn't have that and would have to repaint. That's not the intent of this, to have some kind of approved, a new neighborhood can do that for sure. And starting off, that can be in their covenants, but for an established neighborhood, we realize that's not really possible.
I feel like we should have, I mean, I remember back in the day, we had a house in our neighborhood. It was a rental. And the guy painted his house Ronald McDonald yellow with red trim. And I was on the board at that time, and the subdivision or the HOA talked to him about it and even offered to buy him paint because it was just an eyesore. And he said no. He owned many houses and rented houses, and he never had a yellow house with red shutters before. And so I felt sorry for the neighbors that they had to live next to a bright Ronald McDonald house, but we had no recourse. And so this particular, maybe we just have to think about it and how we would word it. But, I am a proponent of this, especially for like loud colors. I don't want it next to my house, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Any other neighbors have any comments about this one? This one garnered quite a few comments in what I had seen. I know some people were a bit against another committee looking at approving things for their home.
Jeff, I can speak just a little bit about it since I happen to be the whole committee right now. And I can tell you that all of the people, and if Chris is still on, he was one of them, that have come to me with questions, that nothing was out of the ordinary, nothing got denied. And if somebody had wanted to paint their house orange, I would have said something, but I didn't. But anyway, at the neighborhood I came from, if you even thought about painting your house, the architectural committee found out about it. I don't know how. And then you got a letter from them just saying, would you mind showing us your colors before you start painting? That was it. So again, it should never be a committee of one. So I welcome anybody else who wants to be on that. But just to let you know where we are with that right now, even though, you know, I didn't have a leg to stand on, the people that did ask, would this be okay? I gave the guidelines. When people complained, I sent them to talk to their neighbor about their complaint, and that's as far as it went.
Thanks, Gail.
And to piggyback on that, I know that we have a neighbor who did put a beautiful pool in, but that pool has caused considerable amount of problems for the neighbors behind them. And that's a tough one. We weren't involved in it, and there's not much that we can do at this point. And we're talking about neighbors' homes flooded because when the pool, the grading was completed, something wasn't taken into consideration. I don't know what the details are. All I know is that the home was flooded. And now the homeowner on the other side of the pool is responsible for taking care of, calling AquaGuard, taking care of that in this home. So I'm kind of torn a little bit on this one too. I don't have a decision one way or another. I'd really like to see what the neighborhood thinks about it.
Yeah, I'm curious too, as well, once we get more responses on that. Because I like the idea. It's similar to rentals for me, but it's the same kind of an idea of protecting the value of our homes. It's, you know, what is visible in someone else's home does affect my property values, and same with my property. If I don't keep it up, or I put something strange in my front yard, that's going to affect my neighbors as well. And an understanding that the community should have some voice in that, I believe. I believe that. So, but we can see what comes out in the survey. Next, to be no less controversial, use provisions for our homes. Talking about parking, implement basic parking controls. We had tried to word this as well as we could be, you know, but no consistent parking on street except necessitated for unusual circumstances like home renovations, out of town guests, and you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, that was kind of the intent of this. Someone brought up, well, there might be parties you might have at your home, and you have people park in front of your house for those parties. I think that would be included in some, you know, in the line of like out of town visitors. That's not a permanent, consistent thing. But this was intended to address consistent parking on the street, and whether that's a concern to the neighborhood or not. And that's, again, we'll see what the how the survey goes with this, if that's an issue that is on your minds or not. Any comments about that? This does touch, some families may have a hard time with that if they have a number of people in their home that drive. They may not be able to not be on the street. That's a possibility. But generally, that's makes it more difficult in our neighborhood to get around, walk and such. Since we don't have sidewalks, it makes it more difficult if there are cars parked on the street and getting around. So that was the intent of this. Okay, we'll move on to the next. We'll see how that survey goes. The residential use of the home include the provision that homeowners who engage in business activities from their home, that you don't change the flow of the parking or safety or the aesthetics of the community. Because we're not a business district, and we don't want, you know, we understand people would work, maybe have a business out of their home. But I think this seems reasonable to me, that it would not be, a home wouldn't be turned into, like, have a parking lot in front and basically be turned into a business or a restaurant or something like that. That's kind of the intent of this a bit as well, those kinds of things. That's how this provision would probably be worded. So any questions I see a question from Richard Rollins. I would just have to go on the record to say that our streets, it went away. Does someone have the chat that can read
Yeah, I
that?
can go ahead and read this. Yes, thank you, Richard. You'd like to go on record to say that our streets are actually controlled by the city of Roswell, and they should be notified for any infractions to the city regulation. It goes above the power of the board. It actually does. He's correct. If there's any concern that you have about the streets, because they are technically public, they're not private because we didn't pay for them to be paved. We didn't pay for the asphalt, so they are public roads. But I understand what the intent is to not have cars there congregating because there's an actual business being run out of the home that's going to affect the flow of traffic. So yeah, that's definitely, if you haven't responded yet, please put that in the survey. Anyone that you agree with that comment that Richard made, because it might change a little bit of the way we look at it.
Mhm.
And Jeff, just to kind of be conscious of time, we're at an hour. I want to really respect everybody's time. How many more questions do we have that if they're important, I'll go through, but I just want to see how many more you think we may have.
I think
This is the last one.
Okay.
this is it. Yeah, I think this is it. And then the miscellaneous uses and implement use controls like proper pet control, noise limitations, those kind of things, which weren't as strong in our previous covenants. But I think these make sense to have, and certainly would be useful. But again, to see what everyone thinks about it. I haven't noticed myself in our part of the neighborhood a lot of noise issues or anything, or pet issues, but I don't know how that is across the neighborhood. But certainly it's something that we would like as a board to be able to at least have in the covenants to be able to address as a provision of the covenants. All right. And that's it for the survey questions. Again, if you haven't taken the survey, please do, and if you can encourage your neighbors to take it, please. The more responses we get, the better for us. And once that's closed, we will then have a discussion and come back to you with a summary of that and how we want to present that back to the community. Any other questions about comments anyone wants to make?
So in the beginning, there was a question about board meetings. Are they open to the general members or not? I missed the answer to that. I apologize.
I'll let Robin speak to that.
I'd love to speak to that one. My first response, Chris, the answer is, so did you want to join the board? That's number one. Number two, yes, they are. So we will do a better job of making sure we send an email out to the neighbors if we have their email address, and we'll post it on Facebook that we are hosting it. We open it up for the first 15 to 20 minutes to residents. After that, when we actually start to dig into business and talk about financials and collections and things like that, we do end it for the entire neighborhood. So if there's a reason that we need to have further discussion, like tonight, we'll do a different meeting for that. But if we have residents that want to come to the board meeting, we definitely want them to be there. So we promise.
Yeah, no, I thought you guys did a great job. Actually, I was very supportive of that. But I just wanted to ask that. I never heard the outcome of that, and I was glad because the last HOA I was a part of did not allow people to come to their regular sessions because they wanted them to enter in a timely fashion, which I get. But the fact that you guys do is really awesome. And again, a hurrah and kudos to all of you. Thank you.
And our next board meeting is August 15th. If you want to attend, though, it'd be probably better to send to the board an email or something to let us know that, so we're prepared for your question or whatever you want to discuss.
Absolutely, Jeff. That's a good point. And I'll be glad to join the board as soon as you guys adopt 2 of the 6 kids. Thank you.
What Chris hasn't told you is he actually has volunteered. He and his lovely wife are going to be part of our social family adult committee, and he can go ahead and give his shameless plug on the big event he's about ready to host for us in August.
So no pressure. August 13th, 4 to 8 p.m. Yoo-hoo, big summer blowout. There will be a pool party with catered food from Willie's Catering. There'll be games and events for children as well as large children over the age of 18. That means adults, to include a big splash contest, cornhole, because this is Georgia, y'all. And then a hula hoop contest, which was actually volunteered by Robin. And then we are looking for volunteers to help with judging of best dessert, best salsa, and then there'll be a sign up that everybody's going to get if they could pop in how many are going to come, and then what side or dessert they're going to bring. That'd be great. And then if anybody wants to help, just kind of check off the games for kids, that'd be great. We will have prizes, which are not a board membership, but they will be fun. Just kidding, guys. You do a great job. But Jeff laughed at that one. So there will be prizes, but just kind of bear with us. You'll see the newsletter come out with that information. Thank you to Ms. Douglas.
That's right. That newsletter's gone out on Wednesday, so please RSVP and let us know that you're coming so we can order enough food. And then next week, we will do another newsletter that will attach this recording as well as some of the progress that we have made as far as our HOA duties and task list. And I think that's it. If you don't have any other questions, Robin, if you don't have anything to add, Jeff, Debbie, everybody is good. Okay, we went over about 10 minutes. It was an hour and 10 minutes. I appreciate your time. Thank you for coming, and stay tuned to your emails and Facebook. If you meet any of your neighbors and they're not receiving their newsletter, please let me know and we will add them to the list.
Nice
Thank
job,
you.
everyone.
All right, have a wonderful week, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
you.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
week.
Bye. Bye.